So first I want to introduce the panel. Like a lot of these guys are taking their own time to come here and do this. Some people down from Sydney, one person, others from Queensland, others local. So I want you to give them all like a nice big round of applause and thank you very much for coming down. We'll start with Adam Goutrell. He is a writer for AAP. You're usually covering what politicians do in their spare time. A lot of fun, obviously. And in your spare time you do a lot of game reviewing for covering a lot of events. Matt Hewson is a writer for the Black Panel. He also a regular on the Hyper podcast, Pixelcast, is it? Yes. And I've had the pleasure of being on the panel with this man as well. And Jeremy Jungles, co-host of Good Game, co-founder as well. Currently writing for Kotaku, Game Informer. And has anyone seen his show 5.5 Inch Floppy? Because you totally should. There we go, there's some notes there. Beautiful. Wonderful. So these guys are here to answer any questions that you guys have. So by all means, fire them out there. We've got some topics that we do want to talk about. Hey, all right, we had it there for a second. That's great, right? That's fantastic. It'd be good if we had my Tico in the house. That'd be wonderful.
Call service desk.
Yeah, call service desk. We'll log a ticket. So, I'll start the ball rolling. If we hit a topic that you want to talk about, that you want to extend on, put your hand up, we'll answer your question. I suppose the question here that a lot of people are really going to want to know is, hey, there we go, one second ago. The question that a lot of people here are probably really going to ask, and get this out of the way now, where do you guys get off criticising hard-working game developers' games? Because it's pretty low, guys, and you get paid to do it, right? I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I love when they cry and lose money. No, seriously.
That's my goal, to make them feel bad.
Well, if I can bring a company down, it's just fantastic. A lot of people always ask this question at a lot of panels. How did you guys get started in the industry? Because everyone's going to have a different way that they got started because each one of your roles is completely different from each other. So I'll start with Adam up at the end there. How did you get started?
Well, I went to university and studied journalism, so I'm a news journalist, generally covering federal politics. I was over in Indonesia for a couple of years, and video games there are very cheap, and I kind of got spoiled and got used to having $2 video games. So when I got back to Australia, I decided I was never going to spend $80 or $100 on a video game again. So my way to get free video games was to start reviewing them and get publishers to send them to me. So that's how I got into it.
Matt?
Basically, I just like writing, no qualifications at all, apart from the fact that I like writing and I like games. And for a long time I did it just as something for myself on a little blog. And then due to cruel injuries and a horrible football career cut short, I had a lot more time, so I pitched it to a few editors and become a regular member of the website Black Panel and floated around at few other sites, occasionally in Hyper and a few other things when I find the inspiration to pitch an article. But generally just online and do it for the love, not the money.
Jeremy?
Yeah, my entry was a little bit weird. It's sort of through esports. I was playing a lot of Counter-Strike and a lot of Age of Mythology, and I had a clan that was doing quite well, especially in the Counter-Strike side. We got to #1 in Australia on the 2 ladders at the time, but there was someone from the Age of Mythology side that I met, and she worked at the ABC at the time, and so we kind of put our heads together, and ABC had just purchased ABC2. They were looking for new content, and so we wrote a proposal for them, which was Good Game, and they accepted it, so we made a pilot for absolutely dirt cheap. I think it was about $800 or something, and $500 of that went towards my rent. Yeah, they accepted that, so yeah, that turned out to be, then we went on to make season 1 of Good Game for also very cheap. And then yeah, since then it's just been making videos and writing for various magazines and websites and lots of fun stuff.
Did any of you, like, I find this a lot with people who work in the industry, they never set out to say, I'm going to be a game journalist, I'm going to go to uni, I'm going to study, and I'm going to do this as my career. It seems to be something like, I kind of fell into it.
Yeah. I feel like I fell into it a little more than most, just because, I don't know, the act of, I don't know, we did kind of go out and grasp it, but it was also kind of like, just getting into the whole esports thing. I feel like I didn't do normal emailing an editor saying, hey, I'm willing to write for free for the first little while, and then slowly start to get paid, and then slowly work your way up into that usual thing.
Yeah, that was pretty much my route. I started with the Black Panel about 4 or 5 years ago, and I still write for them because I love the group that run it and that, but now I've got a bit of a portfolio at the moment. It's a lot easier to go to editors at Hyper or Pacific or wherever and say, look, here's my work, here's an idea, and you pitch it to them like that and hope they like your idea and want to give you some money to write it. But it's really just pocket money to me. I've got every day job and I just love writing about games, so I may as well get a little bit of money out of it. It keeps my computer upgraded.
Yeah, it's good tax write-off.
That's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Yes, this console is for work.
Yeah, same here, just totally opportunistic. I saw a gap. My company sort of wasn't covering video games at the time, and so I just decided to fill that niche. But like, I think it's a recipe for heartache if you set out to become a games journalist, particularly in a small market like Australia. There's not that many jobs, and it would really take a lot of persistence. And if you sort of do land a job, they generally don't pay all that well.
It's a little grim at the moment.
What's that?
It's a little grim.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is. I mean, generally in the media, everywhere, I guess it is. But yeah.
So how would you, if a young up and starter were going in their eyes going, oh man, I'm going to be just like Junglist and just like Adam, because I'll totally say that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess video is definitely, if you want to give yourself some video skills, that's definitely a niche that can serve you well. It served me well, just, the ability to make video. But there are also, I mean, there are programs that can guide you through that process. Like I think Game Informer has one called Next Big Critic, where you can literally just email them 500 words. And if it's good, they'll publish it in the magazine. The former editor, or no, the current editor of Game Informer was a Next Big Critic submitter. Is that a word? I should know that, I'm a writer.
We'll make it a word.
Yeah, it's a word now, damn it. Yeah, he submitted 3 years ago to Next Big Critic, and now he's the editor. And the former editor of Game Informer is now doing something called Grab It Magazine, and he just put the call out for new writers to help him make that. So there are those opportunities. And you would be surprised at how easy it is to email an editor. I mean, as much as we talk about how grim it is a very welcoming industry with lots of really good, friendly people. So if you do email an editor and say, this is what I want to do, you'll get a reply, and they'll kind of guide you through that. It might not be straight away.
Some of the editors are a bit slow on the email, but
they are friendly, yeah.
They're very friendly, easy to get into the community, and everyone knows everyone. It's quite small because you go to the same events, and you all turn up at the latest EA event or whatever, and you get to know each other, and everyone's really good. And even if you're not going to make a fortune out of it, I'm telling you now, but you have a lot of fun, and sometimes that's worth a bit more than some dollars in the pocket, I think.
Also live in Sydney.
Yeah, it sucks. It's a 3-hour drive to every event. And I'm lucky I've got parents that live in Sydney, so I can crash in bed when I need to, but otherwise, yeah.
The old thing about, it's who you have beers with. It does count, and those beers are in Sydney.
Always. Hopefully the publishers.
Do you find that starting, now that we're moving into more of a digital market, we've got the internet, as you pointed out, getting video skills is a big thing. Obviously, forming relationships with people who are already there and already established is important. I mean, how do you find that these new things are actually affecting the industry as itself? Now that we're sort of moving away from print, to get a review out in a day after it's released, that's actually a big deal, whereas before you would have to wait a month before you'd see it in a magazine. Do you think this is affecting the industry negatively, positively, or that we're still in this transition?
Yeah, tough one to say, because I mean, along with that, and along with YouTube and all that, comes a lot of people providing content for free. A lot of people with their own YouTube channels and Twitch streams, And it's a funny thing, you know, when I personally want to know about it, and I will watch a gameplay video. And as much as, you know, my trade is providing an opinion about a game, I just want to go and see the gameplay footage. You know, it's an interesting little...
Well, it's sort of hitting every aspect, whereas before you would buy a magazine, say Adam wrote a review, he did 400 words, and there's a few screenshots, it's very well written because he's a good writer. Yeah. And you go, wonderful, well, I've read that review, that's great. Now you get someone else who's written the same good review, he doesn't have screenshots, he has video footage, he has sound, and it's articulated very well in the video format. People seem to be driving more towards that. Do you think that's because it's just, we've got this technology now to deliver that kind of media, that kind of content, that's actually a better way of doing it?
I don't think video's going to be a major part of it, but I think there's still a place for written word.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot easier to form opinions in a written document, say 1,000 words or whatever. If you're talking about a particular topic, say R8 egg, that was a big one for a long time. It's a lot easier to get that sort of more difficult concept, I suppose, than the actual just games or games reviews. The extra stuff goes along with it. It fits really well with the written word, but yeah, gameplay, everything on video now, and it's something that I've got to start looking at as part of what I'm doing with my website. We're looking at Twitch and things like that, and so it's something we've got to have to generate hits, and we don't generate hits, we don't get any money and no website. So
Advertisers love video.
yes.
So a lot of sites are looking to go that way. I know Games.net recently made a change where every review they do has to have a bit of video in it. And, you know, it takes more effort, the capturing of the footage, the editing, that sort of stuff. And some sites aren't set up for it. Like I know with Kotaku, they're kind of struggling with it at the moment. Because, you know, they have a good relationship with advertisers and they're doing really well in terms of that. But the amount of effort that goes into video, putting that on Kotaku is almost a waste because, you know, anyone who checks Kotaku, it takes over really fast. Sometimes they have a story every 15 minutes, so what's the point putting up a video and it's going to be, you know, after 2 hours, it's not even on the front page anymore. So some people are struggling with that, but yeah, it is the way we're all heading eventually. Even the mags, the digital mags, the iPad mags are trying to get the video content there.
Yeah, a lot of, there's a few famous people on YouTube who have millions of subscribers and they're often asked about the state of journalism, gaming journalism, and they all say, look, it's, at the moment it's just a bloody mess. They said they don't know really where it's going, but I don't think it's a mess. I think it's just transitioning. You know, it appears messy because like, everyone's still trying to find that way. Like Kotaku, for example, you say it's not set up for video yet, but clearly they have the establishment to maybe go there in the future soon.
Yeah, and by and large, I think, I mean, they experimented with going to E3 and filming just some, you know, really like just easy stuff, you know, like a video diary stuff and then putting that up. And I think that was a bit of a success. But by and large, we're figuring out how to pay for quality video content because it's a hard thing to sell to some people. Like if you're going to some networks and stuff like that, and you know whether they're used to making video content and paying for quality video content, they might not know games. Or if they know games, then they don't yet know the value of quality video content. It's hard to find a place that knows both those things. I had a nice little spot on Game Arena for a while where you know we were getting some good Telstra money, and I was able to pay a video editor and make a nice product there. But yeah, the websites and stuff like that, it's hard to create good video content.
You've got to kind of take it on your own, Matt. If you want to do video a lot of the time, then that means going out and learning. As well as you've got to learn to be a writer and possibly learn to be a video editor.
Everything.
I mean, yeah. There's plenty of stuff on the net though. That's obviously the brilliance of the net. There's enough out there to learn yourself. You don't need to go and get the CIT or tech or wherever to learn how to do it. You can learn yourself if you're committed, but it's hard work. You've got to enjoy it. The first thing I tell anyone that's asked me if they, you know, you've got a great gear, you write about games, you for games, all that jazz. How do I do it? And I said, well, you know, do you love it? Do you write all the time? Is that what you think about doing? Not. Don't. Just don't do it. You're just going to ruin yourself, I think, and probably ruin your experience with a lot of games too. So
And there's an interesting thing there. It's like I think a lot of editors are looking for someone who's probably like if you're writing, someone who's probably a writer first, gamer second, whereas a lot of people are approaching it as gamer first, writer second, and then with video, it's the amount of effort that goes into something that is just like a tips video. Like, I mean, on the video side, there's the capturing and the editing and the recording of your voice and all that sort of stuff, and then the graphics and dealing with all the file formats and all that. But then on the game side, there's the actually playing the game to a level where you can provide good tips, which could be 20 hours, depending on the game.
I was just clocked in at 20 for Wolfenstein last night, so I just finished that, and that's 3 days since I got it. So you've got to have the time. Because there's no point. Unfortunately, Australia is a bit behind, and we don't get a lot of copies before release. We're really lucky if we get something a day before
That
release.
doesn't sound like Australia at all.
So we're already behind the 8 ball with big sites like IGN who've had it for months. And so I think the Australian niche has got to be quality over speed of access, you know, so we've got to write well. And we've got to attract our audience by being competent writers, not quick writers.
Yeah, Australian journalists have survived by providing insight and interesting opinion and stuff like that, not by being on the cutting edge, because the US journalists will get all the press releases first and stuff like that. But you know, if I'm dumping like that 20 hours into a game, I don't know about you guys, but I'm thinking about how to do the review, the preview, the developer interview, the opinion piece, all that stuff to get as much value as I can out of that 20 hours. I think it's all Tetris.
Yeah, that's right.
You can do that in an
Fruit
hour.
Ninja. Yeah.
And anyone that plays games can pick one of those reviews that have just been thrown out in, 20 minutes. If you've played a game before, if you read a review in, say, a film magazine or something like that, I won't indulge anymore. I saw a shocking one the other day on Child of Light, and it was clear that I just reviewed the game myself, and I read his review, and it's clear he played 10 minutes of that game and no further.
So that guy's review was crap, they should all read yours? Yeah?
Something.
Yeah, we'll link you all up later.
Well,
I might hit him up for a job, but yeah, it's obvious to anyone that plays games that these guys don't know what they're talking about. So they need to have people that A, can write and B, enjoy the industry. Because if you don't know about it, you're just talking out your backside.
I do that for a living, I make a good living. Don't know why they keep paying. Now you guys just touched on this a little bit. A big thing in the industry, as a consumer, as a client of the stuff that you guys put out, we don't get it at face value. It's like, there's a review, there's a video, I'm going to read and watch that, that's awesome. I don't see a lot of stuff that goes on before that as well. I was wondering if some of you guys could talk about the relationships that you guys have with the PR companies, the publishers, and that sort of stuff. Good stuff, you got?
Yeah, it's really mixed. Some of the publishers are terrific. They understand exactly what you want. They're really helpful. They have sort of good culture. A company like Ubisoft, for example, I always find a delight to work with. And then others are just terrible. Nintendo for me is just the absolute worst. They are just non-communicative, non-responsive. Getting a review copy out of them is like pulling teeth. They just don't seem to want to promote.
It's like a very Japanese hierarchy
Yeah,
culture.
it is.
It's like
Yeah.
if you're not high on the hierarchy, like they're not time for you.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it's really mixed, and sometimes I think it's a corporate culture. I think with Nintendo it is a bit of a corporate culture. It's that Japanesey sort of thing, but sometimes they just have incompetent PR people, and sometimes there's a change of personnel, and everything is suddenly much better. On the other hand, sometimes you've got terrific personnel at these places, and they leave, and your relationship falls in the heat because suddenly they've got no interest in talking to you.
Do you have a funny story for us?
Sorry.
With these incompetent people?
No, I won't name your names, but
Come on.
no, just kidding. Someone might be live tweeting it. Okay, I can't do that.
Where camp?
It's kind of sometimes a tense relationship that everyone has to manage, and it's always walking a line. And, at the end of the day, like everyone's pretty much mates, and we're all going out for beers and stuff. But yeah, they're professionally. There's a little line to walk with them. They are trying to get you to say nice things about the game, and they're giving you these things which are not a right; they're a privilege. and you know, you're wanting the access, and
That's right.
you know, it's hard to do stuff without access, and yeah, sometimes the relationships get a little tense when someone gives a game a 3 or a 5, and it brings the Metacritic rating down. You know, depending on the publisher, they might react a little differently. Sometimes they get blacklisted. Sometimes they're out for beers the next night. Sometimes you know, you'll get the call from Rockstar saying, you know, why did you do this? And you know, every company is different. Like I mentioned Rockstar because they specifically and openly employ people to raise the review scores locally, and so they'll have people in Australia who report back to home base with documents saying, you know, this reviewer was going to give this a 7. I convinced them to give it a 9. Or this reviewer didn't include something in their top 10 list. I convinced them to include it, and that's their job justification. So it's a very tight line to walk. The PR person that I was thinking of, you know, when I was at the ABC and at 5-inch floppy and stuff like that, walked that line pretty well. He did well. It's still an awkward phone call to get. You know, why did you not include Grand Theft Auto in your top 10? Yeah, it wasn't something I was too keen on wearing, especially at the ABC. But you know, he did all right. It's people generally get it. They generally stay quite professional, and it's only, you know, once in a while I've found anyway that you get someone who really kind of is a bit heavy-handed with it, stands behind you while you're playing, and it's like, now notice it goes into the third-person perspective. I want you to mention the third-person perspective or something like that.
I found most of the Australian officers pretty good. The only time I've ever had critical response was for, I don't know if you've ever played it, if you haven't, don't. It's called Amy. It was a downloadable title on Xbox a few years ago. It was terrible. It was literally the worst game I've ever reviewed. And I got an abusive email from one of the producers of the game saying I didn't get it, blah blah blah, and all this. And I just shrugged it off, and I thought it was a bit of a giggle. But that's the only time I've ever been confronted by PR guys or anything, and that was one of the actual developers didn't like what I said about it. When I looked at the Metacritic of that, I wasn't the only one saying it, so I felt better. But yeah, generally the local guys are pretty good. There's quite a few, especially in the EA, Ubisoft are probably the best. Take-Two's getting better, I think. Activision are difficult.
Your first-person shooter playing, I hate first-person shooter, but oh well, I better read on this. Do you think that actually should be something that's very much focused on Main Street, where it's unfair to say give you that FPS game, where they might say, hey Matt, you play a lot of FPSs, we'll give it to you because you know what you're looking for.
I think it's fair and it's not. I mean, I think we're doing the public a disservice if we're not getting a wide range of opinions. I think anyone that tells you you can make an objective review, they're full of crap. You can't. Everything's subjective. Everything's based on personal opinion. So, I mean, there's been plenty of games that I've loved and no one else did. And there's been plenty of games that I've hated and plenty of others did. It's just personal opinion. But people have just got to realise when they're reading a review, it's always going to be coloured. But I think definitely if you're a iRacing guy, you know, one of the professional guys that do iRacing, and that's all you've ever done, and you get handed an FPS or a puzzle game or something, you probably should go, oh, maybe I'm not the guy to do this.
Some things you can't do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know MMOs. I refuse to do a review on MMOs. I don't like them, so, and that'll do a disservice.
But every outlet has to deal with that. Like every outlet has staff, and they're expected to, or big outlets mainly I'm talking about, they're expected to cover every game, even if it's like an Arma or something like that, and they might just not have the staff or someone on their staff who's like military sim capable, but someone gets stuck with that, and they have to do the best they can. Yeah, unfortunately that usually results in the graphics are this, the sound is that. And that's a bit more of a stock standard review. But I do think like games are a bit more black and white than other media like film and music, which are probably a bit more subjective. Like games are probably a bit more black and white, good or bad.
If the game doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah. It could be buggy, it could just be not fun at all. But no matter what you do, it has its place in like the wider spectrum of games criticism. Like no one really checks one review They check a lot of reviews that go to Metacritic and stuff like that. I think if you're like, the personality of the website comes into play. Like if you're known as a personality website, or if you're known as a critic who is, you know, I give my personal opinion on everything. I hated this just because I hated it. I don't need to give a reason, I just hated it. And then you'll have people that follow you just for your opinion. Yeah.
I think I'm lucky in that I don't have review scores when I write a review for the sites I do, and I hate review scores because when I have written review scores, I don't know what to give it. I write this whole big thing, and I think, oh, well, I've outlined that really well in my writing, and then you've got to kind of put your whole 1,000 words into one number. And I hate that. I really do.
I think it can be a crutch, like if you, because sometimes you get to the end of a thing and then you haven't said some things.
Yeah.
So there's a temptation to put all that you haven't said into the number. And people reading it don't get that. It's like, well, it reads like a 6, but you gave it an 8. So it's a bit lazy, it's a bit of a crutch. It's harder to actually capture your sentiment in the writing.
I think it's a measurable number that publishers and to an extent the general public can use. But I still, yeah, it's hard. And sometimes as a writer, you didn't read the review, you just looked at the number. And it's a bit disheartening at times. But I think they have their place. They've just got to be taken with a grain of salt like everything else.
I'm the same. I don't give ratings to games, but as a gamer, I don't know about you guys, but when an embargo lives straight onto Metacritic that morning to see what we got on Metacritic. Like, I'm as bad as anyone when it comes to grades, but I don't like giving them myself.
I kind of check Metacritic more to see who gave it the 3.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I just want to know who did it.
It's probably Joby.
So actually, it probably is Joey.
So I'm kind of in two minds. Like, the writer in me doesn't like them, but the gamer in me, I'm kind of obsessed with them. And I think our people who read reviews, often they want to score, which I don't know how to walk.
I argue with other reviewers at home sitting on my computer. You didn't know.
They're wrong on the internet.
They're wrong.
They need to be
And then I
told.
look at it and go, why are you talking to me like that? It's that behaviour there, the anonymity.
And you find that people, like, one funny thing that I didn't expect that I found is that the more positive reviews get the more positive comments and more positive feedback. That gets the more shares, the more likes. You're obviously up the top of Metacritic, so you get noticed there if you're like a blog or whatever. And then the ones where you pan a game, that gets the arguments and the trolls and the haters and people, and it makes sense. Like, they're excited about the game. They check in because they're excited. They want to know, tell me it's good. I want it to be good.
Especially an established franchise. I gave Gran Turismo 6 a pretty average review.
You're wrong about
got slammed by hardcore GT fans. They're the hardest of hardcore.
Yeah.
They're like Dark Souls fans.
Yeah, 100%. I get a lot of good. I mean, Kotaku's a little different. I'd say Kotaku has quite a good community due to a lot of community building effort put in by a former editor, David Walkus. He really spent a lot of time and effort on that. So I think that's probably why get a lot of constructive stuff there and a lot of stuff that I would not have known, and which has turned into future posts and like additions that I've made to the articles and stuff like that. But all around, I'm against the don't check the comments thing. I think it's good to have a thick skin. Like I don't want to get HTFU, but I think, I don't know, you should be listening to because people get into this thing where it's like, they don't listen to the comments and then they can be in their bubble. That's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of being in the bubble and then I'm wrong and then I'm too stubborn to change it. It's like, no, I'm not reading the comment. You're trolls.
I'm more than happy for a constructive argument. I love it. I'll sit all day with someone that disagrees with me as long as it's constructive. You do tend to get a bit cynical on the comments though, because there is a lot of hate, internet garbage out there. So trolling through the line of comments and finding something that's worth reading is sometimes a bit disheartening.
After you play Counter-Strike for 10 years, you're completely desensitized. Throw whatever you can at me. It's nothing compared to competitive Counter-Strike play.
I made the mistake of mentioning I didn't like Dark Souls.
Yeah.
And, well, it's not that I don't like it, it's that I don't think my marriage can handle me playing Dark Souls.
Oh, yeah.
Might barely survive.
Yeah, so that was like attack from all angles.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's like, you don't get it. I was like,
It's
"Oh,
almost a compliment, though.
yeah, I get it. I just know what it's going to do to me if I try and play this. I can see broken
But
control.
in fairness to that, you've come out and you're saying, hey, guess what? There's another 10 million people like me on the internet who are like me, and they need to know that I don't like this game and this game doesn't work for me. You're actually being fair to your viewers. So, on one point, I guess you might have to also know your audience, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the wider spectrum of
Yeah.
games because you fit right in there. You're a dot along the line.
That's it.
And it's like, I had this issue when I reviewed Rage for the PC when it came out. And I had this horrible launch where it's like 33% of people on PC had these problems that I was having where it would stutter and it was completely unplayable. It was like for every second of gameplay, it would be like 3 seconds of freezing. And it was like some video card problem, like ATI people mainly had the problems. Yeah, so it was like 33% of people, and I was playing a pre-release copy, so it wasn't common knowledge yet, like what the problem was and how many people were going to have the problem. But I was back and forth with first the publisher and then the developers and stuff like that, making absolutely sure it wasn't my PC that was the problem, because if you're going to pan a game like that, and you're going to come out like with a release review saying this game, don't buy it, like you better be damn sure it wasn't you,
Yeah.
So I was doing some late nights trying to make sure of that, and then I just thought, really, like at the end of the day, I'm having this problem, and in the wider spectrum of games criticism, it'll probably be accurate, like the percentage of people that will have this problem. Like if there are other reviewers out there that didn't have the problem, then that will be represented as is this problem, and it turned out to be exactly the case. It's like, some percentage of reviewers reported the problem, some didn't, and then people checking all the game reviews would think, well, if this percentage chance that it's just not going to work for me.
And you can't hide anything on the net, so people research. They'll find these things.
That new Wolfenstein game that came out, apparently the PC version was very buggy for a bunch of people with specific hardware. And Ben Menzel, who's been in the industry a long time, just wrote this short little piece saying like, oh, this bug is occurring, it's stuffed, we've found this before, and he mentioned a whole bunch of other games which had the same problem because of the same reasons. And you can be guaranteed the first comment was, hey, it looks fine for me.
Yeah.
This sucks to be you, man. Jesus.
There's a lot of different PC configurations out there.
And you just sit there thinking, oh, it's good for you, but that's great. That helps me out a lot of my problems.
Well, they all there's the games by any chance.
They're not buggy, they don't come out. Actually, add bugs, I think, as they go along.
Yeah. They're features.
Hidden features. So,
Computer's 3 years, no, almost 4 years old now, and the hardware's already better than. That's been happening for a while. I don't think Xbox One and PS4 are the real next gen. I think they're like last gen and a half. But the next gen it's not even about hardware power, it's about adaptability to the new trends in the gaming landscape, and free to play and the new business models coming out, and new streaming services, and all that stuff that's going to happen that these consoles can't adapt to fast enough. So the real next gen is PC for its adaptability, and it might be tacked onto that maybe some Steam machines or what have you, but yeah.
I hate the heat and resolution arguments. I think they're pointless. And they annoy the piss out of me. But in saying that, yeah, I'm in the same boat. I've got a $3 PC that runs Crysis 3 at full belt, and I doubt the Xbox and PS4 can do that. In saying that, I don't care. If Microsoft puts out a good game that I want to play, I'll play it on the Xbox. If PlayStation puts out a good game that I want to play, I'll play it on the PlayStation. If it's on the PC,
But those exclusives are also not happening with the same consistency as they used to. The system sellers.
I think E3 this year will be interesting, and I think that'll give us a good idea of, because there's a lot of talk of Microsoft and Sony having quite a few exclusives going to be announced, and if that pans out, then we might be back to having legitimate reasons to have all 3 consoles, apart from the fact that they need to have all toys. But otherwise, if that doesn't pan out and it's just, you know, Far Cry 4 or Assassin's Creed or whatever, on all systems, they're all comparable. They all play the same. One might be a bit shinier than the other. I mean, really, it comes down to personal preference. Consoles are easier for some people, especially families and things. They don't have to worry about the difficulty that's inherent with having a PC or upgrading or anything like that. But, and cheaper in the long run. But I think the more and more consoles go online, the more and more they become a glorified PC almost.
You can build a cheaper machine for your living room that can run SteamOS. You can build a machine that's much cheaper than an Xbox One or a PS4. It runs SteamOS, it'll stream from your main PC to the living room, and then you've got all the games on Steam for Steam prices. It's just a much better deal than going with a console. I just think that, you know, the Xbox and PlayStation, they needed to keep things moving. They needed things moving off of shelves, just like the TV industry needs TVs moving off of shelves, which is why people are getting into 4K, and we're not properly utilizing 1080p yet. Like we don't have 1080p games yet, and we're still moving on to 4K. You know, if you see like 720p properly utilized, it's beautiful. And then when we move up to 1080p properly, it'll be looking even better. But
I think it's funny too, because a lot of Microsoft's backflips, I'm sure paid attention to what happened when it was announced. I actually found them quite interesting because they were basically demanding moving towards a Steam-like system, which is basically what we've lived with on PC since Half-Life 2 came out. But the public weren't ready for that, obviously. So
I think we'll see the re-emergence of a lot of those ideas.
I think they'll come
over the next few years.
Yeah. But, I mean, the idea of digital libraries really appealed to me, especially if they make allowances for the huge amount of data you're likely to have on hard drives everywhere. But I didn't hate the ideas of Microsoft. A lot of people were freaked when it wasn't sharing and all that. But I think it was an overreaction. I think
It's just monumentally botched PR.
Oh, it was. It was a terrible PR job. But I think they're moving that way. I think they're moving towards PCs. More and more media functionality, more and more interactivity with online environments. And it's exciting. Oh, I think it's exciting having new toys and new things to play with. And I mean, really, is there worse ways to spend your day than mucking around on a new system?
Unless it's the
Yeah, something
So, I mean, a lot of people are talking at the moment about the point of diminishing returns when it comes to how much effort, how much money, how much time developers are shoving into games in regards to what you're getting back. So, if you come and say, here's a 720p game, it looks absolutely beautiful, our textures are wonderful, but if we spend another 6 months and $500,000, we could maybe bump it up a little bit more. But that's actually, if you put it side by side, it's not that noticeable, like, as opposed to, say, moving from the Super Nintendo era to the N64 era. We went from this 16-bit graphics to this 64-bit 3D behemoth that we saw. And I can still remember loading that up at home, oh my God, I just can't believe what I'm looking at, this is amazing. And we're seeing less and less of that. So at the point that we're getting where it's just maybe not worth the investment to get that back, what do you think maybe the next
department, because they've been used to taking advantage of the new hardware that's been coming out. That's been the way the games industry has been for so many years, but now hardware is so powerful, it's by a computer, it plays any game for the next 4 years easy. So we're forced to innovate in other ways, and I think gameplay is one of those ways.
Would you say that's the indie scene itself is, I mean, that's exploded in the last few years. It sounds like that's a direct result of what you're speaking about.
Yeah, absolutely, and more people educating themselves on how to design progression systems, and for better or worse, you know, in-app purchases and gamification and that sort of stuff, which can be used for good and evil.
I think the indie scene has had a massive impact on gaming, probably in the general public thanks to Xbox Live and things like that. But I mean, you can see their influence in games, in AAA games now. You look at Rayman Legend and Child of Light, made by Ubisoft, but if you didn't know they were made by Ubisoft, you could quite easily think they were an indie game. They've got that sort of style to them. They focus on tight gameplay and stylistic view instead of photorealism. And I think, and that's what we've kind of hit, that point of photorealism. We're that close to it, I don't think any more progression towards it. It's going to be that impressive, to be honest. So people are going to focus on this more stylish look, Child Light's a really good example of it. Brain Hands are a really good example of it. Where the style is more important than the sheer power, I suppose, of the graphics.
Caricature more important than character. And it's interesting that we like, you know, it's like with companies like that, and it's like the AAA indie game, you know, like with like Chair off of Epic and, you know, EA with their little indie studio. It's like still a part of EA. Still got the backing of EA, but it's also kind of an indie.
Yeah.
And we're talking about it. Like it's like we're giving it that label, like it's a garage band.
It became games like Super Meat Boy and Braid and Limbo and those sort of games that hit so big for an indie space. It opened the eyes of these major publishers to go, hey, there's some serious money to be made here. We need to get in on that. For better or worse, they're in on it now. But I think that little scene is going to be more and more important as it goes on, because I think AAA, it's too dangerous, it's too much of a risk to take a chance. The amount of money they're spending on these games, to take a chance on something brand new is really risky. Because if they get panned, they've lost millions of dollars. So they let the indies who don't have as big a risk, or they do to the individual indie developers, but you know, they take the risks in the gameplay and they go, oh, that was a great game, we'll copy that.
Got a question?
How do you feel about the fact that most AAA titles these days are sequels? Do you think that they're leading themselves into a trap where eventually they keep getting worse and worse and worse to the point where
Look, Call of Duty. It is. Now's the time I think we'll see a few more new IPs kicking off. New systems usually mean new IPs. That's the time to take the risk because there's not this mass flood. So people tend to buy anything that comes out because they need games in the system.
You say that we just got COD Ghost Battlefield for Mario Kart 8.
Yeah. So but we've got The Order and we've got Watch Dogs and a few other ones that are looking promising. But I think, they're safe bets, and that's where the money's made, on safe bets. It's not made on risks anymore, and it's a bit scary.
do you think they'll continue to be safe bets?
I think the writing's on the wall for some of them. I mean, I think that business model will continue to be safe, but for particular franchises like Call of Duty, like even though their day one sales are quite strong still, and they're coming out with their, you know, we broke all these records reports, the actual tale of Call of Duty sales is dwindling, and it's not giving them what they would like to get. So the writing has been on the wall, I think, for Call of Duty. It started 2 years ago. That's when the tail started dwindling. And then with Titanfall, I think already the server populations are quite low. And that's, I mean, I felt that Titanfall was innovating in baby steps. And with what we were talking about before, with indie innovating a lot quicker, I mean, the idea of mastering movement as well as aim in an FPS has been filtering back into the FPS genre, but indie's been doing it a lot quicker. Like Tribes Ascend did it so much better, and then Titanfall almost feels like a step backwards going back to that, and then not giving you esports features and not letting you roam around the map and figure out the best route from point A to point B, ignoring esports and that sort of stuff. Those mistakes, it was like, I feel like they innovated too slowly. And you know, even though it wasn't a sequel, it was the same, yeah. So, yeah.
Got another question?
Yeah, just you raised an interesting point there. Do you often feel pressured to write similar opinions to, let's say, your other journalist peers around? So you see that there may be other people may have given something an 8 or a 9, and you go, well, hold on, I totally disagree with that. How do you actually approach that when it happens?
You know, there's this funny thing that I call the great games journalism water cooler effect. It's when everyone meets up at an event, and the inevitable question is, what have you been playing? And you know, people.
And that means they lose sales. Then, you know, I've hurt someone. So I've got to make sure that I'm 100% on my opinion, that I didn't like the game, and it was ordinary. So that's about the only time when I get real funny about it. But,
I actually have a policy of not reading any reviews until I write my own, and like when it's submitted, then I'll have a check, see what other people said. Sometimes, I'll be surprised, but I force myself to come up with my own opinion, untainted first. Some people do that, some people don't. I'm not saying it's better, but
yeah, that's what I do. but I often, I write the review, and then before I submit it, I'll look to see what other people are saying. I don't change the review on the basis of that, but sometimes I get a bit worried and think, oh, I've worked on this too, what am I, what great innovation am I not seeing? But you go with your opinion at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think I feel like, I mean, maybe it's different from person to person, but I feel like my thought process can be infected by other ideas. If I don't formulate my own first, and then it's like, then after I formulate my own, then we can have a brainstorm, and then it's like, then it's a real meeting of ideas. But if it happens before then, I'm like, I just find those ideas coming up in my head, and I have to realize after the fact, oh, I didn't think of that. Someone else thought of that.
It's hard when we go to preview events together too, because we're all playing the game and getting an opinion on it, and we're all together, so it becomes that pretty hive mind.
I'm used to people not liking anything about me, so I'll just have my own thing all the time. I think we've run out of time, guys, so thanks very much for coming in. Can everyone give a round of applause for our out here today, guys, but we're going to let the next people set up. So thank you very much for coming, guys. Really appreciate it.